students, Mrs. Girot here. We're going to take the Unit 1 test together. So the first thing you're going to do is open up your FinArtB class and go to Unit 1 at the very bottom and find the test and open that up. Here's how that looks. You'll click on Content at the top of the page. Scroll down to Unit 1. Click on the folder. And you'll notice all the way down at the bottom there is a subfolder titled Unit 1 Test. Click there. Excellent. And here's the test. Oh wow, look, I've got slides posted there and a recording of us doing it together in class. You can go ahead and click on that and start your quiz. Now, just so you know, your questions on your quiz might be worded slightly different than mine, but each question does refer to the same artwork, and the answers will be found on the slides that we are going over in class today. So as I am doing the presentation, I want you to be paying attention and picking the best answer possible. Let us get started. So in Fine Art A, we cover ancient art up through the Renaissance period. So the first thing I want to do is just give a quick review. And our objectives are to be able to identify characteristics of art from the Baroque through the Romantic periods. Let's understand a little bit about what happened before the Baroque period before we get started. And you're going to demonstrate your understanding by earning a perfect score on your Unit 1 test. So pay attention and choose the best answers. All right, so back in Fine Art A, we talked about classical art, which was back in, like 400 BC. So it was a long time ago. And the classical ideals were the appreciation of the human form. There were lots of nude sculptures. Everything was about symmetry and balance and harmony. Okay? That's where we see all those ancient Greek columns, things like that, the Parthenon. Medieval and Gothic art followed, and this was a different period. It was part of the Dark Ages, when the Catholic Church kind of ruled over Europe and dominated the artistic world, in the sense that they didn't want artists to be too realistic. They didn't want them to flaunt their talents too much, and they didn't want them to worship the human form. So artists kind of had to pull back a little bit in order to pay their respects to God. It was kind of illegal to be a fantastic artist in that time period. And then the Renaissance, which literally means new, naissance, birth, a new birth, a rebirth. It was a return to those classical ideals where artists would try their hardest and do their best to make things idealistically beautiful, and humanism returns, which is more of a focus on humanity rather than God, and allowing painters in this new time to be able to paint human subjects, and for people to be able to give honor to humanity, which was lost in that period of the Dark Ages. One of the most famous things about the Renaissance was that contrapposto pose, where we see statues that are leaning on one leg, and we see this kind of shift in their shoulders and their hips. These axes are kind of contraposing, they're twisting a little bit. And the effect that it gives is relaxation with a subtle hint of dynamicism. A little bit of movement there, but mostly just calm and relaxed, okay? So that was the Renaissance. And then we start FinArtB at the Baroque period. And what's happening in the Baroque period is we actually have the Protestants now who are breaking off from the Catholic Church. So there's a new church now, and Catholics and Protestants are kind of, fighting over people. They're wanting to attract people to their churches. So the Catholics kind of jump on board with this Baroque concept. And Baroque was actually a word that kind of meant weird, bizarre, and that's how it got its name, because it was really weird and bizarre at this period of history to see statues looking this way with their faces grimacing and their eyebrows furrowing and biting their lips. This is the new David. This is the David that is about to actually throw the rock that slays Goliath. This is the most intense moment of action. This is the climax. And this is how the church is now advertising. Come to our church. We've got action. We've got drama. We are going to engage the viewer. Look at test question number 1. How does David by Italian Baroque artist Gian Lorenzo Bernini demonstrate a departure from those Renaissance conventions? Remember, that Renaissance convention was that calm, relaxed contrapposto pose. Huge difference. So what is it? The figure breaks into the viewer's space and engages the viewer. Notice how the answer engages the viewer. Drama, action. Notice how the answer to the question was right on the slide if you looked carefully. Number 2, let's read this question. It says, which of the following, and yours might be worded a little differently, but it's similar. Which of the following best describes an Italian Baroque characteristic of Gian Lorenzo Bernini's Fountain of the Four Rivers? So we're comparing like this concept of drama in a painting. We're now transferring that to sculpture. So can you see how dramatic this sculpture is compared to like the sculpture of David from the Renaissance? So find the answer that aligns the most with what we just discussed. Excellent. I don't want to give these answers away. I'm already giving them away. There's a little bit of thought, but not much entailed in picking the best answer. All right, question number 3. How did Caravaggio depart from Renaissance traditions to create paintings that reflect the Italian Baroque style? Now, this painting to us in our modern day and age might not seem that exciting and dramatic, but back then, this painting was really unusual. This was not a normal style that they were used to seeing. That's why this is Baroque. It seems pretty normal to us, but what was different about it was the dramatic contrast between shadow and light. Look at that. Look at this line, this spotlight effect that's coming into the room and lighting up their faces. And look at the way we have a couple of subjects that are kind of off in their own little corner here. And the way this is Jesus is just kind of pointing and drawing the viewer's eye over here. And look at the expressiveness on their faces. they're not like, in total shock and horror, but there is some beautiful detailed expression and things happening here. There's a lot of action going on. There's a lot happening in this image. They're not just posed. There's actually a story playing out here. So let's see. Did you find the answer? How did Caravaggio depart from the Renaissance traditions? Well, it has something to do with that intense use of light and dark. Question number 4. What convention did Italian Baroque artist Caravaggio use in the conversion of St. Paul? So apparently St. Paul was not always St. Paul. This is him falling off of his horse, having a revelation that changes his life and makes him seek God and become a saint. This is his moment of conversion. And it might not look like that, though, to an average person. This just looks like a normal scene, an everyday scene in the day and the time of a guy who fell off his horse, right? It's very naturalistic. The colors are natural. But one of the things that we also see here, besides the subject matter, is the fact that he is falling out of this scene. If we were standing right here, we would feel like we were standing right above him. This is called foreshortening. This is how artists project the subject into the viewer's space, or the way that they also make it look like he is projecting back into the background as well. So that's called foreshortening. Number 5. What compositional technique did the Spanish Baroque artist Diego Velázquez use in Las Meninas? Well, something that is very common in art is that pyramid composition. It's hard not to create a pyramidal composition, especially when you're working with people, because the shapes of our bodies themselves form pyramids. And then when you put a bunch of them together, oftentimes you get that pyramidal composition. It feels very grounded and balanced. Pyramids have that nice solid foundation, and paintings will feel more grounded and balanced when you use the pyramid configuration. Question number 6. Which of the following is a characteristic of landscape with the burial of Phocion by French Baroque artist Nicolas Poussin? Well, what we have here that's very French is these idealized landscapes. French are very glamorous, especially in this Baroque period, and we don't see a big representation of not Baroque, sorry, Rococo. We're going into French Rococo, and it's all about glamour and detail and being fanciful. And I know that we're not really seeing a fanciful scene here, but we do see this idealized landscape, and that's very French. Question number 7. Which of the following is a characteristic of Elevation of the Cross by Baroque artist Peter Paul Rubens of the Netherlands? Well, we can see this sense of movement and drama. One of the best ways to convey movement in art is to use diagonal lines. And this diagonal line of Christ right here is bringing our eye right into the scene. We are right in the moment when they are trying to lift and carry Christ. This is movement. This is drama. Normally, we would just see Christ hanging there and people posed, right? This is action. This is drama. We're not used to seeing this at this period of history. This is new. All right, question number 8. Which statement best describes an approach used by Baroque artist Rembrandt of the Netherlands in his later years? Well, it's kind of hard to see here, but I'm sure you've noticed this gentleman's skin is not smooth and supple like we would ideally paint people, right? This painting is actually showing off his imperfections, this texture of his face. He's not making it look perfect. He is using impasto. He's using expressive brush strokes with thick paint to give us more texture, more information about the quality of his skin, about his hair, about the fur lining on his coat. Lots of texture with that expressive brushstroke and thick paint. Number 9. Which of the following statements describes the paintings of French Rococo artist Antoine Watteau? Well, Watteau's art contains delicate, lively brushwork and subtle variations of color. Remember when I was telling you we're going into that French Rococo period where it's going to get very fanciful. We're starting to see that here. We've got women in pink, light pink dresses, even a man in a baby, light pink suit with like baby blue socks. Baby blue and light pink are the colors of the Rococo period. It was very pastel-y and frilly, and it was way over the top. This painting doesn't necessarily reflect the extremism of Rococo art, but there are definitely some hints and clues in this painting that lead us to believe that yes, this is French, this is Rococo. Number 10, Naturalist period. Which of the following statements describes the naturalist paintings of French artist Jean-Baptiste Siméon Chardin? This is naturalism. We do a naturalism painting in this class, and the characteristics of that are to limit the colors to depict the objects with a sense of realism. So you'll see very earthy colors, very reflective of common, normal, everyday life, real life, not imaginary life with angels and halos and gods and demigods and cherubs. We're talking about realism, things that really happen in everyday life, and the way that people really dressed in that time period and how their furniture really looked, things like that. Question 11. How do these paintings by Dutch Baroque artists, Rembrandt on the right and Vermeer on the left, differ? How are they different? I'm sure you can already at first notice the difference in color and the difference in subject matter. I noticed the difference in the brush strokes. Her face is so much smoother and more refined than this gentleman who has a very blotchy, puffy complexion. Vermeer used also natural light coming through this window to create a convincing space. And Rembrandt used a technique that was called tenebrism. Tenebrism is creating a spotlight effect by having that intense use of shadow juxtaposed against that bright highlight, that spotlight. And he depicted figures that were emerging from shadows, whereas she is just basked in natural lighting. The entire space is. Question 12. What is one similarity between Caravaggio's The Conversion of St. Paul and Rubens' Elevation of the Cross? What is a similarity? Well, I see some similarities already. I see diagonal lines, for one. Diagonals are a big similarity here, used to denote movement and expressiveness. But another similarity that we see is that foreshortening. Remember, we see him almost falling into the space where the viewer is standing. And here we also have that foreshortening. These gentlemen, if you were standing right here, you'd be able to pick up the bottom end of that cross and help these men out. They are projecting right into the viewer's space. And we're also getting that sense of Jesus being pushed back into the foreground. That is foreshortening. Number 13. Which of the following statements describes how French artist JacquesLouis de Ved used a neoclassical characteristic in Oath of Horatii? So, once again, we have very subdued colors. This is more along the lines of that naturalism technique, but think of it at another time, a painter might have painted this robe bright red. You know, this could have been a very dramatic Baroque scene if the color schemes had been different. And of course, the poses may have been more active and engaged rather than just standing there posing and holding swords and men's with their arms up. They are posing. They're like doing the yoga triangle pose right now. There's not a lot of action. The women also seem to be posing, don't they? So some of that drama and action has been lost. Do you see how we're returning to those classical values where everything is balanced and harmonious and beautiful and posed and calm? We've got the columns in the background. It's very classical. It's the new classical. We're going back to the classical again. We did it in the classical period. We did it in the Renaissance. And now we're going to do it in the neoclassical period. All right. Question 14. How was neoclassical architect Thomas Jefferson inspired by classical architecture when planning his plantation home in Monticello? So we can look at the Monticello and compare it to the ancient classical pantheon. And you'll notice the similarities visually, okay? So a portico is a structure that has this triangular structure supported by columns. So this is a portico, okay? That's a portico. And the pediment is that triangular area there. There's your pediment. You have a pediment in each one. Columns. We have columns. And then the dome. There is the dome in each of them. So that is where he got his influence. Thus the name Neo, New, Classical. Question 15. How did French artist Eugène Dellacroix incorporate romantic conventions in liberty leading the people? Well, the romantic conventions are bringing in those rich colors that were kind of missing in that neoclassical moment, and touches of pure pigment. Romantic artists are focused on emotions. Do you see the emotion in this painting? Feelings, moods of all kinds, including spirituality, imagination, mystery, and fervor. And the subject matter of romantic paintings can vary widely, from landscapes to religion to this revolution and to simple peaceful beauty. The brushwork for romantic art is looser and less precise, which adds to that dynamic feeling and emotion and intensity. Rich colors create emotion. Colors evoke feelings as well. And that's really important. And artists are going to really start embracing that as we get into modern art. Question 16. Still part of the Romantic period. What characteristic describes the 3rd of May, 1808, by Spanish Romantic artist Francisco Goya? The 3rd of May, 1808, painted by Francisco Goya, depicts the battle at Medina del Rio Seco in Spain. Napoleon's troops marched into Medina del Rio Seco to be met by 21,000 Spanish troops protecting their city. Goya's painting reveals the fear and suffering of the Spanish, while Napoleon's troops show no mercy. Goya uses dramatic light. Look at that highlight on the gentleman who's about to be executed, and that sad look on his face, that defeated look. The light and shadow draws attention to this central figure. Very intense, very powerful, very emotional, very disturbing. That is romantic art, but there is nothing what we would consider modern day romantic. This isn't a romance. This isn't a love story. This is pure emotion. Question 17. Which statement best describes a difference between the romantic artist Dellacroix's liberty leading the people and the neoclassical artist David's Oath of Horatii? So what we're looking for here are differences, right? And we can see right away that there's a difference in the style, right? This was our neoclassical, and this is our romantic. So we have a difference in the way that subject matter is presented. This one has very calm colors. They're very posed. It's classical. It's calm, right? And here we have a very expressive emotion. It's all about the expressiveness and using expressive brushstrokes to create drama. Yes. And you'll notice that everything's a lot calmer. It's lifelike, and the brush strokes are smooth and well blended together. It's very refined. Question number 18. What similarities describes Oath of Horatii by JacquesLouis de Ved and Pilgrimage to Cythera by Antoine Watteau? So once again, now we're comparing that neoclassical art to this French Rococo art, and we're trying to find similarities. That might be challenging, but both of these images have a carefully planned background that resembles a stage set. So yes, you can see the backgrounds are different, but we do have, you know, some supporting actresses here, and we've got some supporting actors over in this painting, you know, in the background, supporting our main characters that are in the foreground, just like in theater. Fantastic work. Make sure that you save all of your responses and submit that quiz. If you were paying close attention, you should have an A on this test. Fantastic. If you missed any of the questions, I wonder why. Maybe you need to rewind this video and take a closer look.